what makes you actually different? And I'd break it down and be like, well, we're one of the only juniors in North America, let alone the world, that actually is owned by a drilling company. We're one of the only exploration companies. We're able to drill at a fraction of the cost of anyone else. And the other thing that really set us apart is we were going into historic districts in Nevada, which is an old jurisdiction. And we were picking up projects that have been dropped by Nevada Gold Mines, by Barrick, by Newmont in the past 15 years, and have been held for decades. And we completely reinterpreted the geologic models. We actually sold one of those projects back. So Barrick, for example, dropped our Swift project in 2016. We acquired it from a little prospecting group, more than tripled the land package, rebuilt the geologic model from ground up, and proved that the right host rocks that Barrick had written off were actually there.
I've always wondered how these various young but clearly very successful junior exploration MDs decided to take the plunge and get into the risky game of exploration. Often they're geologists, no MBAs, no accounting, legal or general business background. So what drives them and what's been their pathway to get to where they are now? How hard was it? What sacrifices did they have to make? What lessons were learned? So in this episode, I sit down with Chad Peters. Chad is a 36-year-old geologist and MD of Canada-based Ridgeline Minerals, which he co-founded in 2018. Ridgeline focuses on exploring for Tier 1 Carlin-type gold deposits in Nevada. We talk about what makes his exploration company different. How does he stand out? As a geologist, I really enjoyed listening to Chad explain the company's exploration success coming out of an emphasis on good old geology. We also talk about exit strategy for shareholders, putting a pitch deck together, having the right partners, and having good experienced advisors around him, and how to spot an opportunity in exploration and geology data that a lot of others are also looking at the same time. We talk a bit about tapping into a different kind of mining industry investor in the Silicon Valley style backers out there, and in particular a group of financiers who have a focus to invest in the next generation of explorers. We talk briefly about using social media to communicate with shareholders, and of course I asked Chad about his crystal ball outlook for juniors in 2023. I hope this chat gives you a bit of an idea of what it is to start an exploration company as a young entrepreneur. I found it really quite inspiring to listen to his story, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey Chad, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, I don't believe we've met, but I talked to one of our listeners the other day, and it was quite a interesting conversation. He said, "How about you talk to some people who've, come from an entrepreneurial background, and particularly people who've started junior explorers or mining companies or exploration companies the world over, and particularly the sort of folks who don't have 4 decades of experience, and talk about how they actually got into something like that, because that's not." Is that a career choice that you start with when you go to uni, or is it something that you just roll into, and who are the people that you meet to make that work, and just the journey of doing that. And I thought it was quite interesting because I don't really with this channel really like to go into commercial stuff and plugs and all those kind of things, but I do like talking about what makes successful companies work, and I'm really quite excited about talking about things that work for other people, and I've already had a number of great chats with people who've worked quite high up in successful companies, and talking about culture and what works to make that to make these companies successful. So I ventured out, and he actually made a few suggestions, and you were on the list. So Tag, you're it. We've never met, so I had a quick peek at your background, but I thought, look, let's have a conversation and see where it flows. And maybe if you want to, so you're a geologist, obviously, so that's probably a good point to start. That we obviously share that.
But, usually I screen my emails, and yours came up, and I read the first 2 sentences, like, oh, okay, this isn't spam. So I'm glad we got a chance to connect.
Oh, good.
So,
I'm glad that you didn't swipe me left, I guess, as they say. But
typically
thanks
it's
for making the time.
Swipe left scenario, but this sounded fun. So I'm a geologist. I'm just turned 36 actually last month. So I started my career in Canada as a geologist, and working for just small juniors, and it was kind of you mentioned about, does someone plan getting in and trying to be an entrepreneur or whatever? And I had no intention of starting out my career saying, yes, I'm going to start my own company and all that. I just, I knew, I had an uncle that worked in the oil business, and he said, hey, you should get a geology degree. All the
Yeah.
geologists on our oil rig make a ton of money. Why don't you come do that? And so I
Yeah.
said, that sounds great. I love tons of money. And
Yeah.
so I went to university and took my first year, and I realized just how boring oil field geology was. And so I transitioned into hard rock geology after in my second term, and got a job with at that time was a penny stock called Premier Gold Mines, run by Ewan Downey, who's had a lot of success in the business. And at that time, it was me, him, and his brother essentially, and like one other geologist, and just got into the working in Red Lake and saw how exciting it was. And I ended up spending a decade with that company and helped grow it from, I think we took it from about a $30 million stock to just under $1 billion at its peak. And that has since been sold to Equinox, parted out, and became Equinox took the Canadian assets, and I-80 Gold Corp, which is now another $1 billion story, took the Nevada assets. So during that time, I just got to be a part of kind of every level of exploration, development. Working for you and the team was great because they kind of, instead of hiring from outside, they actually tended to promote from within. So by 24 years old, I was running a two drill, 25 person fly in, fly out drill camp in Northern Canada. And,
Wow.
I guess when you get thrown into the fire with that stuff, you kind of either sink or swim. And luckily I had a good team to rely on. And so kind of just over the years, just kind of got higher and higher levels of responsibility, and kind of hit a point where I realized I wanted to start doing things my way. And every company has its mandate, what they're trying to achieve as a company. And I wanted to focus on early stage exploration. And that was the genesis of starting Ridgeline in 2018.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite a story, and it kind of appeals to me because you described that sort of early stage of the career. You got to have bosses and managers who allow you to take all of that on, right? I mean, you can't really do that if you work in a big company. You're going to be rig jockey 63 on rig number 145. And you don't really have that freedom to develop. But what was the special sauce for you then to see that you're good? You obviously realize, hey, look, I'm good at this stuff, and it's a combination, right? Because geology is one of those disciplines where wear
a lot of hats.
Jack of all trade, master of none. But you're good at organizing stuff. You're good with data. You're good. Obviously got to understand your geology, but. At what point did you realize, hey, look, I can do more with this? Because that first job that you just described. It sounds like a very short time span to get quite a lot of responsibility. I mean, was it just a combination of your bosses just being very open to this? And sorry, I forgot his name now, but is that where sort of the opportunity arose first? Or?
Yeah, well, actually, essentially, my manager who was running the camp, I was kind of second in command, just two of us geologists there. He up and quit, just like one day, just called in and said, I'm not going to be on the plane up to work. And I was already at the site. And so Ewan called and said, can you do this? And I said, I'll tell you in 2 weeks, kind of thing. And that's kind of how it went. And so I had really good bosses that I could, throw ideas back at. But I mean, when you're up in the middle of Northern Canada in a fly-in bush camp in minus 50 weather, you learn to figure out problems on your own. And so I grew up on a farm in just rural Manitoba.
Yeah, right.
So same thing, right? You kind of like being a farmer is a jack of all trades, right? Instead, when you're 50 miles or 100 miles away from the nearest mechanic, you figure out how to fix your own problems. And so that really translated. Actually, I didn't even realize it at the time, just how well that would translate into a geology career, which in reality is just solving problems and finding solutions, right? So that was kind of where I created a niche in the company. Is I actually bounced from project to project because I kind of became a bit of a fixer in the company. So if a project wasn't going well, whether it be staffing, whether it be logistics, typically I would get moved around to that role. I'd assist whatever team was in charge, or else I'd take over the project itself. And it kind of went each way depending on whether I wanted to be fully involved in the project or just stay for 6 months and then move on. But it gave me a really good opportunity to see tons of different rocks, tons of different deposits. I was a part of 12 million ounces of gold discovery in about a 10-year period. So just it really kind of, I got about 15 years of experience in 10 years, so it worked out well.
Yeah. Look, I again, that resonates. And one of the things I want to ask you, because I've kind of gone through a fairly similar trajectory, and one of the struggles that I had was how to deal with building a team, because as much as
Yeah.
a lot of these things are common sense and problem solving, which is very mechanical, and you're good at
Yep.
that because that's your upbringing, and you've got an analytical mind. When it comes to people, it's not always just a matrix and a problem solving sheet with arrows to the
No, I
right.
agree.
And right at the early start of your career, to hire and fire and do that diligently without just this real there's a people side to the business as well, and building a team is not easy early in your career. I mean, did you gather your own team around you, or were you just lucky with good people already around you, or how did you sort of deal with that conundrum?
Good question. Early on, it was usually I was coming into an existing team, and usually what I was doing was, and it was difficult, right? Because a lot of times there was people that were 20 years my senior that were incredible geologists, but really
Exactly.
weren't great with people, right? And
Yeah.
so they were actually where the project might have been failing was actually on the logistics and the people side, right? And
Yeah.
and so I would have to come in, assess the situation, and either work with that person who sometimes frankly didn't want my input or feel
Mm-hmm.
it was necessary, and work with that person, or go back to management and say, this person is the problem, and
Yeah.
I don't want to work. I don't want to run this, but you need someone else running this, right? So it was a tough thing. And then as I started building my own teams, it was a lot easier because I am very much kind of a decision by committee guy. So I always try to involve even my earliest stage geologists. I try to always make sure they understand
Nice.
why we're making a decision, right? So that, as they're progressing through their career, they understand the long game, not just, go do this, keep your head down and don't ask questions. That's never been how I run teams and projects. So as I got to build my own teams, it did smooth things out. But there is always, I mean, you're right, the people part of it's the hardest. And geologists are notoriously like engineers. I don't know, is your background geology?
Yeah. I'm a geologist as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we won't crack any engineer jokes. We'll be nice. But, geologists and engineers are a lot alike in many ways, right? And part of it is sometimes we can be analytical to a fault, right? And sometimes you forget that you are working with people. So it is a tough balance. And me moving over and starting my own thing actually happened when I had built a great team of about 30 people. We made a big discovery in Nevada, was turning into a very big story. It's still the highest grade undeveloped gold deposit in Nevada, I think, actually. So it's a solid discovery that we made. But then suddenly we were growing so fast that a new person was brought in, and about 30 years our senior. We had a very young, hungry team, and this person was brought in, and they were just a very toxic kind of whole
Right.
part to the whole team, and so it actually broke up kind of broke up the whole vibe of the team. People started leaving. And that's when I decided I wanted to start Ridgeline, because I realized,
Got it.
I busted my ass for 2 years to make that discovery, build that team. And then it was
Yeah.
all just pretty much the rug was kind of pulled out. So that's, I went to my wife and said, the next time I put in 80-hour weeks and put you guys through this, we're going to own,
Yeah.
the gold that we find. Right. So that was kind of
Yeah.
the push.
Well, look, I subscribe to that, because it's really hard to do that, bust your balls, and then see, the rug from underneath you. You lose control when things grow too fast, and
Yep.
you hire people, people hire people, and it's very difficult to maintain your vision on the people in the company, and yeah, especially in an environment. We all know how difficult it is to find skilled labor at the moment, and I'm sure it's the same on your side as it is here. But those rigs gotta keep churning, and you gotta put people on, and you end up making some suboptimal decisions, and yeah, that can go wrong pretty quickly. And the same feeling on my side. I always wanted to control my own destiny there, I guess, and be responsible for hiring that team. And with Ridgeline, you probably took some people across, and you have a circle of people that are around you that you've probably been working with for a long time.
Yeah, luckily my VPX, I actually hadn't worked with him. He was actually kind of the competing discovery, Mike Harp. They actually had call it the competing discovery going on at the same time in Nevada. So we actually were kind of both young geologists, both leading new discoveries, and kind of, drinking beers at conferences and stuff, and both kind of probably, kind of bitching a little bit about what's going on at our own companies and saying like, I don't like this, I don't like that. And so when I started the company up, it took about 15 months. Literally, I left the job as U.S. exploration manager for Premier Gold. It's a great job, steady, all that kind of stuff. And I just quit cold turkey, and told my wife it'd be 3 to 5 months to get funded. And it took 15, which it took almost, I'd say it took almost a year of failed pitches and realizing that I was valuing my company too high. And
Right.
I wasn't showing a clear path to profit. Like, how are these investors going to make their money back? And I think that was my biggest problem in the early days of the company. I had good projects lined up, ready to execute. I had Mike ready to move over as soon as the first financing hit. He was ready to make that move. But just time and time again, I'd be in these pitches to these, guys that, gray hair, very successful. Maybe this is their 30 or 40th year, investing in the space. And I just kept on missing that mark of, when the end of I had a lot of guys say, how am I going to get my money back? And a
Yeah.
lot of times I was like, well, I'm going to do this. And he's like, those are hopes and dreams. Like, how am I going to get, what is the path to me recouping my investment and maybe even doubling it? Right. Yeah. And I didn't have a good answer for a long time. So it actually forced me to, that year really forced me to refocus my pitch, hit the high points in the first 5-6 slides of the deck. Here's the company. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's the business model. And I actually tried to identify the fatal flaws early on, and I'd actually address them head on, right? And by the end of it, I was saying, look, I'm not promising I'm going to make a discovery, but I will test these targets faster and cheaper than anyone else. And that was the genesis. Like I actually co-founded the company with the owner of a drilling company. So we got a strategic drilling contract for 3 years.
Yeah.
And
is that what you mean on the website by the right relationships? I think you got something on there, which is
that we're partnered with Barrick and Nevada Gold Mines as well in one of our projects. So right from the start, what I wanted to focus on was, look, exploration is literally the worst business you can be in, right? Statistically, rarely does it pan out. There's a lot of shysters and shady people that are putting lipstick on a pig and selling it back into the market. And so we were trying to differentiate ourselves. And so my whole push was look, I've made discoveries before. I will not guarantee you I'm going to make one now, but I will do it cheaper and I will do it faster. And we'll fail fast, right? Was the idea is, like time's just as important as, in these swings in the markets, you want to hit those windows. So I just kind of said, look, we're going to pump through as many projects as we can in a short amount of time as possible with real meaningful exploration. Yeah. And if it pans out, then, it's huge, obviously, right? So.
Yeah, well, I wanted to actually tap into that a little bit further because your website says as well, want to do this differently, and I'm sensitive to that because I run a company and also run a junior, so I'm going through the same pains as you are going through and have gone through those.
I apologize in advance. Then it's been a rough year.
Yeah, well, it has been a rough year, but discovery always helps. So that's been good to us. But exit strategy is key for people. People need to know how to get their money out, and you're quite right. It's not easy. I mean, you can put a good project on there, but the different tag, from a marketing or business development perspective, I've always found it difficult to touch because you got to be careful to say that you're different. You got to be able to back that up, And what I find, so I run a consulting company you probably haven't heard of because we obviously operate in different jurisdictions, but good luck saying you're different, right? What are you going to do that is different in this market, right? How you're going to build a different model, or you're going to use a different mouse to build that model, or what are you actually?
And we caught a lot of that like early on. It'd be like people being like exploration done differently, like they were kind of like laughing, and they're like, "What makes you actually different?" And I'd break it down and be like, "Well, we're one of the only juniors in North America, let alone the world, that actually is owned by a drilling company. We're one of the only exploration companies. We're able to drill at a fraction of the cost of anyone else. The other thing that really set us apart is we were going into historic districts in Nevada, which is an old jurisdiction. And we were picking up projects that have been dropped by Nevada Gold Mines, by Barrick, by Newmont in the past 15 years, and have been held for decades. And we completely reinterpreted the geologic models. We actually sold one of those projects back. So Barrick, for example, dropped our Swift project in 2016. We acquired it from a little prospecting group, more than tripled the land package, rebuilt the geologic model from ground up, and proved that the right host rocks that Barrick had written off were actually there.
Just to stop you, so who in that process of Barrick dropping it, because it's all about timing, right? And you need to be in the right place with the right people, the right time, blah, blah, blah. But who sent the email to who saying, hey, look at this project, this is what we got to do, this is the project? Was that a team effort, or have you just been sitting there spending your Sundays trawling through all these tenement maps and just looking at what's out there?
At that time, it was me. So I was about probably 9 months in to the 15-month process when what became Ridgeline's first package of properties came on across the table. And I was looking at this prospecting company called EMX, Royalty Generator. And they had these great assets that were deep conceptual targets right in the middle of historic trends. For example, Swift was only was 6 kilometers away from a 23 million ounce gold mine and had never had drilling below like I think around 1,000 feet, kind of thing. And so we saw it. It was just me at the time. And so I approached EMX, told them about our drilling company, said, look, this is, our drilling contract will allow us to test these deep targets that no one's been able to test for years or been willing to take that risk. We can do it for half price. So, that was the push. And they said they partnered with us.
Well, that's interesting because it's kind of EMX's model as far as I understand it. So I'm sure that 100 other companies and 100 other geologists looked at that opportunity and they either passed on it for one reason or another because this is 2018, is that right? Or just
2000? Yeah, it's late 2018.
Yeah, so the market had already turned and was becoming, hot again. So at that point in time, there are plenty of people looking and sniffing around. Did others just leave it on the table because the cost of exploration and in terms of the balance and the value proposition just wasn't good enough? Or did you see some? What I'm trying to get at is, I like working with people who can look at a set of data and they say, I don't know what fucking is, but there's something there. And I and just have that eye, and I'm trying to work out, well, what is that gene, and what does it look like? I mean, or is it just literally a balance sheet with an Excel spreadsheet and say, yeah, look, we can do this cheaper?
No, well, it was a mix of both, actually. So when I guess one thing that attracted DMX to what I was trying to do when I came in and proposed this to them is the fact that the discovery that our team that I led with my previous company was in what a typical Nevada geologist would say is the wrong rocks, off trend, not the right area, right? And so you and then I kind of just got ingrained in me over the years, but pretty much we would just go into areas that previous companies had written off and we'd reinterpret the geology and we'd make big discoveries. And so I'm a bit of a contrarian geo in that sense, in that if I see, and I don't mean to be rude here, if I see a gray haired geo with 40 years saying, that's the wrong rocks, I immediately want to look there because typically it means it's been written off. Probably there's a lot of hubris involved in there too, right? Of just, old kind of exploration methodology, and that's big in Nevada, right? Is a lot of areas have just been written off, and that was Swift. So Swift, for example, had been written off because they said essentially there'd been a facies change for non-geologists here. One rock type was transitioning into another, and they were saying essentially someone had put a line on a map and said from here on, all the good rocks are gone. Yet there was no geologic process or real reason for that, right? It was just purely probably someone trying to trim their land position in the land department at Barrick, and said, what, let's just get rid of it. So we came in and said, there's really no reason for that to not be the case. If we can prove those host rocks are actually here, this is 70, at the time it was 20 square kilometers. We expanded it to 75. We said, this is 70, what could be, one of the largest land packages not controlled by a major in Nevada, that's only kilometers away from a world-class gold mine, right? And the only thing that was keeping it, that was essentially having people walk away, and others had looked at it and said, well, the right host rocks aren't here, so we're not interested in optioning the project. And I was the first one that came to EMX and said, there's no reason the right host rocks aren't there, and I can drill it for cheaper. And they loved it, and they were like, yeah, we feel the same way, but we can't convince anyone to do it. So it was the right time. The markets, it was still early, still not a good enough market where a project that conceptual was going to entice an Agnico Eagle or a big group to come in and look. So we took the R&D approach and we drilled 2 holes, proved that the exact host rocks you needed are there, and they were altered. And NGM came and did a $30 million deal with us.
Nice. Well, that's a success story, man. So well done. That's really nice. I mean, we need more of it because we have to do all the exploring, as some people would say in this end. The big companies. We're
the R&D. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're probably taking that risk, and there's a good bit of discussion on whether enough of that is happening to sustain it all. But that's really a story. But if you then go to these shareholders, come back to what you're saying earlier, it sounded like they're more interested in the exit strategy rather than your technical team's capability. Being a young guy, did you ever find that sort of response from the investors that you're talking to, like, yeah, great story, but who the hell are you? And because, you know, the geologists, I want to be careful with the ageism card, because obviously, you know, a lot of good things, and it's pretty sensitive here, because just digressing slightly with the employment market where it is, you know, a lot of workers, you know, with decades of experience saying, look, I'm ready and I'm available to work. And you know what? I know a lot of stuff. I probably can't do your leapfrogging for you, but you know, I can tell you where to drill, and we're being undervalued. And there's a good point in that. So, you know, it probably goes both ways, because I subscribe to, you know, a different way to think about it. And if you've been trained for 40 years to look at it this way, then you're probably not going to change your mind on the prospectivity of an area. So I align
Agreed.
with that. But how did your shareholders respond to that? And was there a lot of convincing to do, or did they never really bother because your record spoke for itself or something like that?
Well, you know, I think there was a bit of a hurdle to get over, mostly from the execution standpoint. Like, I think I'd been a part of multiple discoveries, I'd been able to have success. I think my technical record, I was able to just say, look, this is what I've done. And people were like, great, that's good. Where the concern came in is, can you actually execute it, right? Like, so sure, you're a geologist, but can you go into the capital market side? Can you raise cash? You know, geologists are notorious for being not particularly great CEOs sometimes, right? Because we tend to create little science experiments and spend a lot of money and don't get a lot of, you know. So I've focused really hard on, when I was talking to these guys, is saying, look, here's the process here's how we're going to raise capital. Here's the plan for going public, because obviously the end game is you need liquid shares that you can actually trade into the markets. So we actually set, one of the things that I did early when we did this deal with EMX, they gave us 3 projects, core assets in Nevada. In return, they got 9.9% of the company. And that was a carried interest in Ridgeline until we raised $2.5 million US. And we had to go public on either the TSXV or the NYSE in the first 3 years. What that helped me with, when I was then talking to these shareholders, saying, look, I have to go public by this date. If I don't, the whole company comes apart, right at the seams. So I was able to say, like, here's, you know, actually kind of clearly lay out, here's the path to you getting your shares public. And I think we were able to do it in 2 years, actually. So we did it in 2 years. COVID hit. We IPO'd in August of 2020. We had the IPO plan for April of 2020. My banker called me up, like, after a bad news cycle on COVID, you know, and he just called up and left a voicemail and said, IPO is over, you know, kind of thing. We'll try again in 6 months. And it was kind of like you're sitting there at the table with, you know, 2 kids under 6 screaming and tearing apart your home. And you're just like, oh my God, where do we go from here? Right. You know, we were able to hit a good window. You probably remember, you're in the business. Like August 2020 was a really good, you know, just that like fleeting quarter of like everybody suddenly loved gold stocks again. Yeah. I think we went up to like 1890 or something. We were able to go public. We've raised about right around 17 million Canadian life of company since 2018. Been able to keep our share structure at 68.5 million shares. So tight share structure. You know, I think we've been able to navigate that. You know, as a young CEO, I've been able to navigate that capital market side, but I've tried to surround myself, you know, and maybe I was being a little hard on older folks, because like you said, that wealth of knowledge you can't get, you know, aside from just being there and doing it, right? So what I've done is I have a really great team of advisors and board that have been around for 30 years. They've had success, whether it's technical or on the capital market side. And I rely really heavily on them. You know, I got a great team on the technical side. I can just let them loose. And then I focus with my board on, okay, what's our strategy for raising cash, you know, and that side of the business. And we're actually kind of going through a bit of kind of realized just recently that, you know, there's just such a hard market to raise money and stuff like that I'm really trying to focus on reducing some of that shareholder risk even more. So we have about 6 projects right now. I'd like to move 2 more of them into the hands of majors, just the same deal, you know, and let them do some exploration. We retain a 25% fully carried interest to production on all the deals we do. So it's, you know, there's a lot of upside there, right? If a discovery is made, even at only 25%, no risk to shareholders. And then what I really want to do is try to bring in, can we acquire a resource, you know, and something with a resource, room to grow, that becomes kind of a real flagship asset for us. So I think as a small company and a young CEO, you know, you're always constantly trying to, you know, where we started in 2019, 2020 is certainly things have evolved, and our strategy has evolved over that time. So You got to be nimble as a young CEO. And I think I've been lucky enough to get shareholders that kind of are trying to invest in the younger generation. Like some of these guys are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And they love the space. I think they'll be investing to the day they're pulling out the ventilator tube, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like honestly, like these guys are obsessed with it. But they are trying to. There's a kind of a group of junior resource investors in Canada and the US that are really trying to focus on young CEOs. And so I was able to tap into that kind of side of the market. Those folks have continued to write checks on every financing. And as long as I'm being transparent and executing, at least on the general plan, can't control the markets. But, we're spending the money the right way. So it's worked.
Well, if you say can't control the markets, I mean, obviously...
I tried for like 2 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's only so much you can do.
It created a lot of stress. Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. And you look at the share price probably every day and beat yourself up over all sorts of things that you can't control.
Wasn't productive.
No, that's not productive. It's almost like, engaging too much with Twitter. You just got to, and all the investors that hang around there, there's only so much you can do to help everybody and please everybody. So do you use that much, by the way? Because I found, there's a bit of a random point, but, the investors here, and when I say here, it's probably, I'm in New Zealand, obviously, but when I say here, it's probably Australia because we don't really have much of a market in New Zealand. But Twitter isn't a tool to communicate. Do you use it much? Because there are quite a few sort of younger CEOs of juniors that are quite active there and are always talking about what they're doing there. Do you use it or?
Yeah, we do use it pretty extensively. I mean, we've been slow the last month and a half just because you're kind of pissing into the wind right now. It's Christmas time and stuff. But we do try to we have a quite a strong following of just we always during drill programs. Pictures, updates, etc. We just, I remember when I started investing, that would have been 2010. I started getting into it, a little bit, just trying to dabble, and you'd put money into a company, and 4 months later there'd be a press release, and then another 2 months after that there'd be a nothing press release, right? And you'd be like, when the hell? You just felt like you didn't have access to the company. Yeah. So we're trying to make it so that for better or worse, people are 100% aware of what we're doing. Right. Yeah. And, there's no transparent or there's no, it's a tough business for, a lot of shady stuff that goes on. You see a lot of companies burying results or trying to kind of mislead, whether they're upfront about it or not. But there's a lot of misleading investors goes on in this business, and especially in the penny stocks. So we try really hard to make sure that we're an open book. I have a CEO.ca account as well. I don't know if you use that, but it's pretty well used in the North America, in Canada for sure. I have an account on there, and if someone's talking shit or talking good stuff, I'm trying to be on there being like, hey, you don't like the results? Well, here's what they mean. Or, you don't like the fact that one of my directors sold some shares. Well, that's part of, his shares are expiring, kind of thing, right? Like his options are expiring. So if he doesn't sell them, just whatever.
Well, you've got to be on top of it, otherwise it spirals into something that is just complete or complete fiction. Oh, yeah. And but the flip side of that is that we have here the Hot Copper is the equivalent website in Australia where people hang out to talk about the stocks, and sometimes I always look both on CEO.ca. And on Hot Copper, just to see general responses to things. I mean, sometimes I'm not even involved in the company. I don't invest, but obviously I've got clients and.
It's nice. It's nice to see how the retail market is responding to a press release. Right?
Exactly. It's just what wording do they use? What did they expect? I mean, the resource is pretty good, but the share price goes down. I mean, what the hell? I mean, what did people expect, and how are they talking about it? And I like that. You've got to be engaged and got to be transparent. But with the market the way it is, gold's doing quite well. I'm sure you guys are looking at a pretty decent start to the year with this sort of hope. Everybody's talking about it breaking out this year. I'm sure this is all the CEO.ca talk, if you call it that. But what's your crystal ball showing? What do you see this year looking like?
Honestly, I'm so gaslit. On the whole market at this point. And it's not, don't confuse that for hopelessness or anything like that. But, I think we've had so many false starts in the metals over the past year and a half. I think the reason you're now not seeing a really big run in all the juniors and things really taking off is I think people are just not convinced that this is an actual sustained push. So I think long term, call it, I think by the end of 2023, I think gold and silver and all the commodities are really going to be ripping. But I think there's going to be a lot of volatility in that time frame still. The U.S. is still hiking rates, all that kind of stuff. So I try not to get too heavily involved in that stuff because at the end of the day, I am a rock licker and still learning about the capital markets. But I think it's going to be a really good year for the juniors and stuff like that. I think money's going to start flowing back into the space. I actually have some we did a small raise in last September, kind of just like a bridge financing, right? Just to keep the lights on and do a small program at our Selena project with hopes that the market was going to improve. But I'm actually going to see if we can try to tap into some alternative financing markets as well, right? Not just going back to the same old junior market group in Vancouver and, saying, hey, can you write checks? Which usually always comes with, well, sure, at a discount with a full or half warrant, right? So we'd like to try to see if we can try to break into the Silicon Valley market a little bit more, right? There's a lot of awareness now that there's a lot of critical metals that are required in the US. You're seeing big funding going to groups like Cobalt and some other groups that have actually been able to tap into that market. And I think it's something that we'd like to try to get into it. I don't know if we can, but we have a silver, lead, zinc, and gold discovery at our Selena project, for example, with copper potential. Those are all metals that should be domestically supplied in the US, right? And so we're going to try to see if we can tap into some different markets, people that recognize the long-term play there and aren't just focused on, well, when are my shares coming free trading and can I maybe even short into your financing? That'd be one, there's two different, you kind of got two different markets. I don't know if the ASX, if you guys struggle with those kind of things as much, but man, it's really tough to be a junior, right? Like the same folks, and don't get this the wrong way, I got great shareholders, but you have the same shareholders that might participate in your financing. If they catch wind of that financing, they'll probably sell into the market for a month leading into that financing, drive the price down 30 cents or, 30%. And then you've now set a new floor for your financing, which is, a significant discount to what you intended. So it's a very tricky market to raise money right now.
Yeah, look, and that does resonate, but I think the markets are different. But again, I'm a rock licker too, so I'm also not the right person to talk about. But what I notice is definitely there is more of a opportunism in Canada around the markets. There's far more. I don't know if liquidity is the right word, but it's far more activity, right? And there's a lot of people really trying to bank on this on the junior activity. So I think ASX is probably, is the word slower the right to use? And maybe not.
It feels more stable. I mean, I don't follow a lot of stuff. Yeah, you guys carry a lot bigger floats too, right? Like, so when you got 300 million shares out as a junior, and you trade, you might trade 200,000 or 300,000 shares a day. That's nothing at 2 or 3 cents, right? Like that doesn't materially affect your market cap, right? No. Whereas, our high was 75 cents and a 45 million market cap in 2021 before everything really took a slide. We're at about 17 million right now. But, 50, anywhere from like 50 to 100,000 shares on a bad day can really affect our stock, right? We can go down 15, 20% in a single day on just someone's decision that, hey, I'm selling my 100,000 share position. So there's a lot of action around the TSX for sure. And there's entire banking groups and companies that make a living by they're not buying into a stock because like yours or mine because they think, hey, this is going to be discovery and I'm going to sell out on a 5x. They're buying that financing. They're waiting on their 4-month hold and they're hoping to make a 20% clip plus clip their warrant. Right. And they're done. Right. And that's their business and there's nothing wrong with it at all. But there's a whole ecosystem of that.
Well, and you got to, as a company, you got to obviously play to that and or be aware of that as you plan your strategy and your financing. So that and that probably doesn't make it easier. But and maybe just to come back to your point about diversification, because I do think that's interesting, and everybody is trying to diversify into this critical mineral space, as everybody knows. So that's certainly not a newsflash. And there's companies here that were one-show ponies with some gold asset in some country, could be far away, high risk, and suddenly they pick up a lithium project in South America, with a few fluffy rock chips, and you can tell that the entire strategy is now building around that, and you're going like, oh.
Yep.
Is there a lean into that comes from just a board, or is it just some careful positioning? And I mean, again, if you don't want to talk about it, because that's obviously
No,
deeply
happy
strategical,
to.
but
Like,
yeah.
yep.
How do you, yeah.
We're not making that shift, where we're like, hey, we're suddenly now being a critical minerals company. What we're going to try to work on is we're gold, silver, lead, and zinc, right? That's what we have across our 5 projects. And what we really want to focus on is, sure, lithium or cobalt. That's the flavor of the week, and everyone knows that that's very critical for getting batteries up and going, right? But in reality, actually, to build a Tesla, to electrify the United States, kind of thing with new charging stations, you're going to need a boatload of silver, lead, zinc, and copper, right? And gold as well, right? So I think it would more be an awareness thing, where if I can tap into, let's say, a new market, it would more be focusing on, look, we're not changing our focus as a company, but we're trying to let you know that what we're doing is important to the, kind of the green revolution that they're branding it as in North America here. But this is what we're trying to do is important. Domestic supply of metals is going to be far behind our needs, and you should be getting into something like this early now, not waiting till we're already behind the 8 ball, right? So that would be kind of the push. Whether it's successful or not, I mean, I have no idea. But we live right on the Reno, right in Reno, which is near the California border. So we actually have a lot of Silicon Valley folks that live in the same area as us and go to school with our kids. And you have a couple beers and talk to them, and they have no idea where the source of the metals, a lot of them, is from, right? And a lot of them, one lady said, well, everything's recycled. Why are you even a miner? Like, you're just polluting the earth. And a Tesla's made out of recycled materials. And I said, sorry, but like maybe the shifter knob, right? Kind of thing, right? But like that's made out of high quality aluminum and steel and all these different, and that's all mined, right? And so I think that there needs to be a major shift in understanding for just the general public of where our metals, just like, the farm to table thing with food, and people started really paying attention to what they're putting in their bodies, right? I really want organic eggs or whatever. It's no different with, what we're consuming as well from materials, right? There's just not that understanding. And so, I'd like to try to do more of that, just kind of pushing that understanding for the little audience that I have and the little platform that we have, but trying to get more awareness for that kind of stuff. It's better for all of us.
I guess as we all do, and that's actually a popular theme on this channel as well, and the conversations I'm having. I mean, it is, and look on LinkedIn and the activity and the posts around, and it's not the mobile phone argument, right, anymore. I mean, I think we've grown beyond that a little bit. We've got to be a bit smarter about it. And I did see this post the other day, and I should have saved it, and now I can't find the bloody thing anymore. But it was a nice way, a nice angle to look at this problem, because the argument was something along this. And if somebody listening knows what I'm talking about, then please send me the link. But it went something like, there's got to be a point in the near future where the global, appreciation of that balance, the argument of it's got to come from somewhere, it's got to shift in terms of an actual appreciation of the industry. And perhaps that's not phrasing it really well, but really trying to zone in on a point. Okay, we all understand the stuff comes out of the ground. We can't recycle it all. Yes, we got to do better and all those things. But it's still coming out of a very negative space. It's all about.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And there's got to be a switch at some point where as a global community, we're going to say, okay, no, this stuff does need to come out of the ground, but it has to be done sustainable. And this industry is actually, by and large, doing a really good job. And we've got plenty of disasters and fuck-ups that we need to do better with, right? And that we just can't. We can't let that see the light of day with all these disasters that are still coming out. It's terrible for us as an industry and for the world, but that's got to swap over at some point. And at that point, these people that you're talking to over a coffee there in Silicon Valley should have their checkbooks open, right? And this is, I mean, without talking about the junior that I'm running now, I mean, we've got this kind of this, we're in the rare earth space and got a great project. And, I'm really banking on meeting some well-positioned entrepreneur or Silicon Valley with who says, look, actually that's a great project for me to put,
Yep.
0.01% of my wealth in being, $500 million, right? I mean, some of these really
Yep.
wealthy people that can be a cornerstone. So you can stop dicking around with the 500s and the ones and
Well, raising enough money, like, yeah, no, I agree. Like, we have a project that we've been working on for 3 years, and it's just been this, it's a great project. I could have already had it to resource and heading towards a scoping study if I'd been able to raise the capital,
exactly, yeah,
access the capital required to actually move it forward aggressively, right? And so I'm trying to find ways. How can I raise that money to do it? But I agree. Like, what we really need is, like, look at Elon Musk. I mean, he tweeted about. I remember about 2 years ago, he tweeted about a lithium company. Right.
yep,
All he did was tweet about the name of the lithium
yeah.
company. Right. And suddenly everyone on Reddit is like, he's
That's it.
buying, Tesla's buying this company. They went up like 1,000%.
Yeah,
And the CEO was coming out and saying, I've never spoken to Elon Musk in my life.
I remember
I don't
that.
know who he is.
Yeah,
And it was a big deal because that guy was like, I think he was worried he was going to go to jail. Right.
yeah,
Because,
of course. That's
because,
what Elon does, right? Yeah,
yeah, Dogecoin, you name it. Right. But I mean, all it takes is, you see one guy saying, "Hey, this is important," and people just pile into it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that usually, like, we have some really good friends that work in Silicon Valley, and once they understand what we're trying to do, and that I'm not out there with cyanide, just like shooting baby birds and pouring cyanide on flowers, kind of thing. I'm not. Yeah, surprisingly.
Yeah.
But once they realize that you're not this, some crazy prospector, destroying the environment, and that you're trying to find something, and you're being once I filled them in that, you realize that we have to bond sometimes tens of 20 to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the scale of the project, with the government before I can even put a shovel in the ground. We've already committed to sustainably reclaiming that back to essentially zero. And they're like, oh, wow, that's okay. So that the risk is, I think there's just a real misconception. You're right. It all comes down to, can we get more people excited about it? Because even if you got 5% of the folks that are following tech to materially start paying attention to mining, it would completely transform the space, right?
Yeah. Now, look, and I do feel, I want to be positive about this, that we are, I wouldn't say on the cusp of it, but you can sense a pendulum swinging a little bit. There's been a good decade of this discussion now, and it will come. There, I marked it. So now I'm going to get in trouble in 10 years.
Now you're at where are we at? We're at like 40 some minutes. So there we go.
There you go. We'll make that note. But well, look, I mean, with the whole Bitcoin collapse and that whole FTX nonsense as well, people got to realize that there's a whole bunch of bullshit companies out there that with invented monetary systems that still get a lot of investment, because everybody's competing for dollars, right? And I read a long time ago that the mining industry, in terms of returns on investment, it just isn't holding up against many of the classic markets, whether it's the tech or, for a few years it was bloody cannabis up where you guys are, obviously, right? The cannabis stocks were all it. And so you're constantly competing for that dollar. Is that going to change? I mean, I'd like to think this. I mean, I've never put a cent in Bitcoin, thank God, but hopefully,
I avoided it as well. But
I'm glad.
Mostly because I didn't understand it early enough, and then I'm pretty serious about not chasing stocks once they run. So by the time I did understand, hey, this could be an interesting play, it was already
too late. Yeah, now I had to say, I was like, well, I'm not going to do that, and I don't understand what you don't understand. You should probably not invest in, and you might as well go to the casino instead, I guess. But
I think. Yeah. Gold miners have been historically, gold, you name it, just mining in general, have been historically poor stewards of capital, right? They tend to, like, you've seen it, like you see majors making acquisitions at the highs, right? You see majors making acquisitions at all-time highs for commodity, and paying billions of dollars for projects without doing good due diligence.
Yep.
And that was a big push, I think, from 2005 to 2012, there were so many stupid acquisitions that you saw in the space that almost buried some big companies, right? Barrick was in a tough spot. That's why Swift got dropped, right? They were trying to cut costs.
Right.
So they were cutting land costs in Nevada, and that didn't make the cut because it was early stage. And now we sold it back, or, we optioned it back to him on a $30 million joint venture. And, so like you look at that and you go,
probably hurts.
Yeah, not great for them, but it was good for us. And they've been great partners, so we love working with them.
Well, they're doing all right. They got some fantastic assets around the place.
They're doing just fine.
Doing a pretty good job there. Yeah. Anyway,
you're seeing a shift. A lot of juniors aren't a lot of majors aren't going out and overpaying for stuff now. They're buying back stock, they're restructuring, they're paying down debt. You are seeing more fiscal responsibility. And I do think a lot of these majors are trying to appeal to the Warren Buffetts and the bigger guys and get on and say, show that they're actually making money, right? Because in the past, all they've done is times are great. Let's go spend $7 billion. Yep. And then we'll spend the next 9 to 15 years clawing our way back out of debt, right? And it's just been this. So I don't know. Seems like there's a shift. Companies are being more responsible with their cash. Yeah. They're starting to invest in juniors again, which is positive, I think. So I think things are turning. But yeah, it'll be a while.
No, I agree with that. And look, maybe as we sort of move towards the end, and I like talking about these sort of what's keeping you up at night questions, because it's always a good way to get a good balanced sort of cross section of what bothers people. What's your top 3 in terms of what's out there in the industry at the moment? Not just particularly to your company, but what's bugging you? What are you worried about, other than obviously just the markets themselves? What's on your risk list with the board?
I think, it's tough. That's a tough question to just throw on me there, but I'll run it. I'll go with it.
So it's all on the spot, so you can say pass as well. Sure. Yeah.
We'll see how I do. We can grade me after. One of the things that really gets to me, really keeps me up right now, is how do I grow Ridgeline? How do we keep on showing growth in a market that's not rewarding technical success, right? You've probably seen it, right? We've made a pretty significant discovery at our Salina project.
Zero movement.
I can't get, we're down 60% since that discovery was made. We signed a $30 million deal with Barrick. We're down 30% since that deal was signed, right? So you look at it, and what keeps me up is how can we find a catalyst that allows us to beat the market? Right. And whether it's a new discovery, whether it's an acquisition, access to capital, honestly, isn't a concern if you have a good asset, right? You look anywhere around the world right now, if you have a new discovery that shows serious potential, those projects are getting funded at any market condition, right? Mm-hmm, they have funding. So that's what keeps me up is we've made a big discovery, in my opinion, that I think is going to get pretty exciting. And we've done deals, but they haven't moved the needle for us. So I'm looking for, that's what kind of is, I'm looking for that catalyst, and I don't know whether it's an acquisition. I don't know whether it's a drill hole from one of our existing projects, which of course there's so many ifs that are involved there. So that's maybe not a very clear and concise answer, but
no, it actually, I think it really is, because I completely, I think everybody listening who is working in a company or running a company like that will probably say, yes, me too. I mean, that's we've just helped a client put a resource out, and it's an improvement and it's an increase, share price goes down, and you put a hole out that is an absolute spectacular hole, share price goes down. And I think sometimes the only thing that you do is trigger investors who kind of half forgotten about the stock, oh yeah, who are these guys? Well, that looks somewhat okay, but here's all this other stuff, let me get this money out, right? I mean, that's obviously not what's happening.
Oh yeah, you trigger a liquidity event, and then it actually starts, I had one time, actually, when we announced the Barrick deal, I found out quite a while after the fact that it was actually a large investor, good guy, but just had to shuffle his portfolio. And he ended up selling about 250,000 shares on that news because he knew that he had a window where he could do it without driving us down too hard. Yeah. But what it did is it actually sparked selling, because I start going on CEO.ca and people go, well, it must be a bad deal. Yep. I mean, there must be something in here that's a problem, because there's a lot of liquidity right now. So those fuckers start selling, right? I shouldn't have used those words. Sorry for swearing there.
No, that's right. We're based in Australia. Every second word is fuck ASL, and
I worked with a lot of Aussies early on, so I got a pretty bad swear words nowadays. But
I don't want to be the central theme of the channel, but look, I mean that is the problem, and the thing is, there's 1,000 projects like that, or 1,000 companies like that around the place, and what can you do to make that to keep all of that moving forward? I don't know. I find that I can completely subscribe to the answer that you gave there, but what to do about it? I guess that's maybe come back to the previous point. That's why most people are now going into these critical minerals, because they can see that just triggers all these reactions. Lithium, I've heard about that, I'll put some money into that. I mean, those are all the retailers, obviously, and the mom and pops.
Yeah, you can rock chip a percent lithium on a spodumene target right now. And even if you look at the plan view map and go, there's literally no chance this is going to be something,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
stock's probably going to pop pretty
yeah,
hard, right? And
exactly.
you could say that there's like lithium companies in the space that would be the equivalent of Ridgeline, right? Like in that same
Sure.
exploration kind of phase. They're trading at valuations that are 5 to 20 times what we're trading at, right?
Yeah,
Just purely on speculation. So yeah, like if there's a lot of people that are making that move, there's nothing wrong with making that jump. I've never been kind of one that subscribes to that kind of flavor of the week
sure.
kind of push. Like if I started as a gold, silver company, that's what I'm mostly focusing on. Is there room to move if the right opportunity comes up? Sure. If there's a
Yeah,
copper play or something that I really like, I'll do that. But that's kind of the tough part. And then the other thing is too is I've built a great team. I got 3 great geologists plus their families working for us. So on top of all the other factors that kind of play in, right, is how can we make a splash, raise money, beat the markets as far as kind of performance on the stock basis. As we got families that rely on Ridgeline to be successful, right? They're real families and stuff like that. So those are the other things that kind of it's not just how can I get my price up so everyone thinks Ridgeline's great. It's how can
well, you
we
have a responsibility. You're
grow?
employing people,
Yep.
and I feel the same way. I mean, again, a consultancy runs differently, but if you guys run out of money, we run out of work, right? So it's pretty
Yep.
simple. So it's
Yep.
and that is a bit of a central theme here. We're all in this together, and got to come up with the solutions to make it work. So for that reason, really interesting to compare notes. Whether it's this side, that side in terms of jurisdiction or commodity or whatever else it is, there's definitely a
Yeah, I
central
mean,
theme.
it doesn't even have to be mining, right? Like, I mean, I think those are the struggles
Yeah,
whether you're young, old, whatever. But if you're an
yeah,
entrepreneur and you have those companies, you're
yeah,
always, I mean, you're always worrying about money and you're
yeah,
worrying about your people, right? And if you can solve those two problems, a
yeah,
lot of the other things will solve themselves, right? But if you can find the money, if you can find the right people,
yeah,
you've usually covered 90% of the major problems, and then it's
yeah,
just execution at that point, right? But
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and not to just to argue with that for the sake of it, but the problem that we were describing before is like selling an iPhone isn't difficult if everybody wants the iPhone, right? And once you've
right.
come onto that, once you discover that and you've designed that, I mean, then the rest is mechanics and marketing and sales, I guess.
Yep.
But the problem that we have is there is a good project here. If you look at the actual fundamentals and the actual valuation and the gold being gold, and I once looked at a statistic. If you take all the world debt and you divide it by the actual physical ounces present in volts in the world, then the gold price
Yeah.
should be 23,000 per ounce and not 1,800
Yep.
an ounce. I mean, so
Yeah. Yeah.
fundamentally, I still don't understand how
You should.
that bloody gold market works. But so the point is the fundamentals are sound, and still it doesn't get traction. And it's not like
Yep.
there are 100,000 companies like this out there. Yeah, there are a few, but I mean, your presentation and how you presented that project is as good as you can get it, right? I really appreciate it. The PowerPoint presentation and the choice of words and how to describe that value proposition, the pitch deck, those first 6 slides that you reference. That's giving everybody exactly what they need. So in terms of being competitive, why is it not getting traction? Yeah, and not because it is, obviously, because you're doing better than most, but it is difficult to do so consistently and also with some clarity into the future. So yeah,
Oh, for sure.
the
And
joys.
you look at stories in gold stories, and they'll have guys that are 40 years old, 50 years old, have maybe built and sold a few companies, and those companies tend to perform just a little bit better, right? Like they could be the exact same asset as ours, same style,
Right.
but they have that, like, we're young, fairly unknown, don't have a big following in the space, and it helps to have those kind of folks involved in your companies, right? Not
Yeah.
only do you get that their knowledge involved, but you also have their experience that translates into the market, right? People go,
Sure.
I made money on that guy 5 years ago,
Well,
so I'm going to
that's
hold my stock longer than I would on Ridgeline, for example, because I believe they're going to make something happen. So yeah, that's part of
well,
the
people
struggle.
good they follow good people. That's definitely an important one. So that's like these guys have done it before. So I'll be in there for the long run. So now that makes sense. Look, a really really good conversation, man. Appreciate all your insight. Anything from your side that I've said or that you thought, hey, maybe come back to that or
No, I mean, we covered a lot of ground in a
a lot of
short amount of
ground.
time.
We had a bit left and right.
You have an RE, a rare earth. Sorry, I didn't say that well. Rare earth project.
Yeah, that rare
Yeah.
earth project in the Northern Territory. It's clay
Okay.
hosted, so
Oh,
there's not
very
many
cool.
of those around, but
Yeah.
very very extensive. Yeah,
Well, you mentioned the iPhone comment, and I was like, I wonder if you could calculate how many iPhones your deposit could help build,
yeah,
right? Kind of thing, right? Like, and put it in perspective of like, hey, we can help make 500,000 iPhones or something like that
yeah.
from our deposit. I don't know, but like that's it's trying to get people to take a very complex idea or something like that and say, look, this is why this is important is pretty tough, but.
Yeah, look, I mean, the argument in the rare earth space, and it's not my background. I'm a gold guy personally. I'm a resource geologist building resource models, right? That's what I do for a living. So, and that's what my company does most. And the rare earth space for us has been a fairly recent development, basically, just going along with the market. And we weren't looking for a rare earth discovery. It's actually a vanadium project, and we stumbled upon the
Oh,
rare
cool.
earth by almost by accident, which is how most deposits get found these days, I guess, by drilling the hole in
Yep.
the wrong location. And oh, look at that! But look, I'm probably underselling the team's efforts a little bit here, but it's a different market, right? There's a lot of China sort of philosophy in the sales of that with vanadium and steel and the rare earth dominance there, and the geopolitical aspects to a rare earth deposit in Australia and not Africa or Asia or China
Yep.
or
There's a
there's a lot.
there's a premium on that. There's a premium on that immediately,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, but then you add in the mix that it's clay, so you got metallurgy as basically metallurgy drives everything, and that's a very new space still for a lot of people. So yeah, all to explore for us, but exciting, right? It's exciting, and we're private, but we were trying to do an IPO. You were saying before that your broker rang you up and say, yeah, nah, as they say over
Yeah.
here, and that happened to us as well. But we're trying for 2023. I was going to say new year, but we are in a new year. We're hoping for a Q2, Q3 listing here on the ASX. So
Exciting.
that's our goal. So watch this space. But now, look, appreciated talking to you, Chad. Really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, hopefully, are you going to PDEC? Or do you do
Yep.
conferences or?
I'll be at Roundup, VRIC, and PDEX. So if you're going to be there, let me know.
Yeah.
I'll buy you a beer.
Yeah. No, it sounds good, man. Hey, really enjoyed talking to you, and yeah, see you in the future at some point somewhere.
Sounds good, bud. Cheers.
Cheers,
Thanks.
man. Catch you.